This is the Stinger, a faithful replica from Asperia of the actual Vanduul heavy fighter of the same name. Originally created for the UEE Navy as target practice for pilots and gunners, Asperia has now made this legendary heavy available to the public for purchase. The Stinger's recent reveal had a lot of players excited, but once they got into the odd cockpit of this heavy fighter, they were disappointed by its many shortcomings. Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V, and today we're going to be taking a look at the newly released Stinger by Asperia to see if it's as bad as players say it is, or if there's more to it than meets the eye. At first glance, the Stinger is quite a looker. It has a very ornate and beautiful design pattern to it, and it follows the design language of the Blade, which was the newer fighter that we got from Asperia that was also meant to be a replica of the Vanduul light fighter. And as you can see from this footage here, it looks completely different from the old Vanduul fighter design that we have from the old Glaive and the old Scythe. Now, those have been updated, obviously, but we haven't gotten them in our hands quite yet. They are going to be debuting in Squadron 42, and it's uncertain as to whether CIG is actually going to give the new versions into our hands anytime soon. We shall see. Now, the redesigns are quite interesting, and when you listen to the ship and you even see the new updated UI elements, it really gives me a sense of the Zerg from StarCraft. It has that feel of some type of creature that you're flying or something like that. Even though the Vanduul aren't flying like actual like beasts or anything like that, the Stinger's not a beast, it is an actual ship. It has a biomechanical feel to everything. Even when you listen to the sound design, the ship itself feels like it's alive. It feels like it's gurgling, like you're inside this kind of beast. It's a very interesting design decision that is very different from what we had in the past for the Vanduul. And of course, those changes reflect on the interior as well. As you enter the ship's ramp, you have to go through these kind of rib cage-like substructure. It has a very Geiger-esque interior for it. And unfortunately, this ship, despite the fact that it is a newer ship available to players, it is still not a gold standard ship. Now, if you're not familiar with that term, gold standard means that it is essentially a ship that has all the newest features available currently in the game. And that essentially means that it has a functional clickable cockpit. It has interior component bays that are usable for when engineering comes in. It has a fuel port. It has even control surfaces, despite the fact that control surfaces don't work, and much more. An example is, look at a Gladius. A Gladius is the gold standard ship that is constantly used, and CIG always is updating it constantly. And unfortunately, this does mean that the Stinger is in the unfinished category. It does not have any physicalized component bays apart from the fuse box that is inside it. Now, this may not necessarily affect gameplay all that much, with the exception of, say, for example, missiles, because missiles do knock out components very easily on the ship, and the ship is very, very much a missile magnet. And because you don't have the centralized component housings, I think the components are probably somewhere in the wings, if I had to guess. That means if you get hit in the wings by anything with splash damage, you're going to lose things like radar, you're going to lose your shielding, you're going to lose even your power plant. And even in the footage you're seeing on screen, this was me playing Arena Commander, getting hit by a size 1 missile and then losing my radar because, again, my components are not sitting in a location that would be a lot better, like, for example, on the central fuselage. I think these components are probably sitting closer to the wings, which means if a missile hits in those areas, those components are going to get toast. And this is a problem when you don't have a gold standard ship. You start having these weird behavioral issues with combat. I know it probably doesn't mean much to most folks, but again, remember, you're paying real money for something that is ostensibly unfinished. Go figure with an alpha project, right? All right, let's move on. So as mentioned before, the Stinger is a heavy fighter, costing $290 war bond at the time of publishing of this video, and that comes with lifetime insurance. You can also get a $315 standalone version, which has 10 years of insurance. This does make the Stinger very pricey, as yes, it does have the alien tax tied to it, but at the end of the day, it is very, very specialized, and I will say ahead of time that you need to be very cautious before you purchase this and understand what this ship is designed for. We'll come to that a little bit later, but first, I want to talk about the size of this monster. It's huge. The Stinger is large. It's standing at a whopping 35 meters in width and length, and is about around 10 meters in height. And the only thing that really beats it out in this category of heavy fighter really is the Warden, only by just a small amount. It's quite crazy how large this thing is. So it's really kind of perpetuating this issue a lot of alien ships have, where their size is massive. Now, CIG tries to offset that, for example, with the Jean ships by making them far more maneuverable than you would expect, despite the fact that they are the size of a barn. However, the Stinger does not have this ability. It is not a very agile ship. It is quite the opposite. So it is not only very easy to hit, it's also a very, very sluggish ship. And that is despite the fact that it is sporting 3 main engines, 2 retro thrusters, and 16 maneuvering thrusters for a total of 21 overall. And I mean, I'm not lying when I say it is very yawn-inducing when it comes to the performance of the ship. It has about 8 Gs of forward thrust and about 207 meters per second SCM speeds. It is really sluggish compared to the other heavy fighters out there. So it makes it an easy target for nimbler fighters to dance around it. So if you're in a light fighter, as long as you're not in front of it, you could easily slot in behind this thing. So coupled with its large size, lack of defensive weapons because it doesn't have any turrets, the Stinger is just as easily bullied in long-range engagements as it is in any knife fight, since it really just struggles to keep the target in front at nearly any time in a fight. Speaking of which, its offensive weapons. The Stinger does field an impressive array of weapons, about 7 hard points featuring 2 size 2s, 4 size 4s, and a single size 5 Wrath cannon that can't be changed. Now, the default weapons are light strikes, which are the Tavaran anti-fighter cannons that are developed by Asperia. You usually find those like on the Talon series. And it also sports 16 size 2 infrared missiles for those long-range engagements. Now, the default weapons are not really that impressive. Like I said, the light strikes are anti-fighter cannons, which means that you're going to have low damage output, higher ballistic speeds for those projectiles, but also a really, really slow recharge rate in between firing shots. So my recommendation would always be to swap out the main weapons on this thing to something like ballistics, for example, to have a much higher damage output and not deal with the power draw, because the power draw is one of the biggest issues with this ship. It has a very suboptimal power output, and that is thanks, unfortunately, to its 2 Grade C Size 1 industrial power plants. This means the pilot will have to decide if they want to put all their power into shields, weapons, or engines exclusively, as there is very little room for flexibility with these power plants. Even with Grade A military power plants and removing power from the coolers, the Stinger still has to sacrifice a lot of power pips to get other systems to be more effective. So for example, if you need more power to your laser weapon systems, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of your shielding and your boost capability. If you want to be a little bit more defensive, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of your weapons output for defensive shielding or even more boost. And that compromise may put a lot of pilots off, as a lot of pilots really enjoy having the flexibility of being able to dial things in the way they want. This ship just simply doesn't allow it, even if you have the better power plants for it. So if you do plan on getting this ship, my strong recommendation is to throw out the default weapons in favor of a ballistic loadout, such as using Revenants and Sawbucks together to keep the ballistic speeds closer to 1200 meters per second. This will limit pip separation when you're engaging targets. Now you could also chuck in some stealth coolers as well to free up power pips and provide you a little bit more wiggle room for power allocation, so that way you can have more power to allocate to, say, for example, engine boost or your shielding. And in general, I will say it's just a smarter idea to stay away from any type of energy weapons for this ship, especially since ballistics in general have gotten a substantial buff in recent patches. And also, who doesn't like ballistics? I mean, come on. Now, if you decide you do want to run energy weapons, my recommendation would be to use the Omniski series, the cannons that are kind of like the mid-range cannons, as they pair very well with the Wrath cannon's projectile speed, so it kind of limits that pip separation that you may have when engaging targets at medium range. Now, let's make no mistake here, this ship does need an escort to be effective. While it does have a decent amount of HP, about 12,000 HP on the body and almost 37,000 in total at the time of this video's publishing, it is not a dogfighter. Its horrible handling characteristics are only slightly better than that of the Ares Starfighter. And this is where players seem to be disappointed in the Stinger. It seems that many were under the auspices that since this is an alien fighter, that it should outperform in maneuverability much like a Jean fighter would. But instead, the ship is actually closer to an Ares than many would actually like to admit to. And also, like the Ares, its job is an anti-material fighter platform. Its job is to hunt down heavy assets like multi-crew ships and other heavy fighters, take them down with its impressive array of hardpoints and its massive size 5 laser cannon. Pure offense is what the ship is good at, and everything else is completely secondary. I mean, the ship doesn't even have an ejection seat, let alone turrets to defend itself, which fits the Vandal's MO that offense is more important than self-preservation. And despite lacking any defensive turrets, it does sport at least 2 size 2 shields, the default of which are military grade C that do require still a decent amount of power to operate. My recommendation is to swap them out for 2 FR-76 grade A military shields. They have a very fast recharge time, which means that the Stinger, despite its slow speed, can do hit and run passes on larger ships, for example like capital ships or multi-crew ships, then peel off to quickly recharge their shields before pounding away at the target again. And I'm sorry, I do have to talk about this because there's still a player base that are absolutely obsessed with this side of things, and that is the stealth aspects of this ship. At the end of the day, this ship is not very stealthy. It has a 19,000 cross-section, which means your enemy is going to pick you up on their radar the moment you even spawn this in your hangar. I'm sorry, but no amount of stealth parts can hide that level of signature output, especially for that cross-section. So don't waste your time putting stealth components on it. Now, you can get away with putting stealth coolers on it to give yourself a little bit more pip output, since coolers still aren't functioning fully as they're supposed to, at least not until engineering comes in. So you can do that, but don't expect putting stealth components on this is going to somehow make this a stealth heavy fighter. It's just not happening. So with that all being said, is this ship actually any good? I mean, a lot of players have absolutely derided this. Now, my opinion is yes, actually. It's pretty good at what it does. While it performs poorly at dogfights, that's not its forte. It is designed to focus most of its efforts at tackling hard-to-crack targets. Line the ship up with ballistics and watch as it effortlessly carves up hammerheads and pops turrets on capital ships. And watch it as it slices through other multi-crew combat vessels with absolute ease. And its multiple hardpoints vastly improve its mission flexibility compared to other ships like, for example, the Ares Starfighter, which, while also being an anti-material fighter, however, is not as effective because the Ares tends to perform poorly on its own. So for example, if an Ares is trying to fight, say, a capital class ship on its own, it generally underperforms, and the Ares generally works better as a flight, having multiple guns focusing on a target, whereas the Stinger can operate a little bit more solo because of that flexibility. And this has to do with the flexibility of its hardpoints and also how tanky it is, because it's just as tanky as the Ares. One of the big drawbacks of the Ares, Inferno for example, and if you're trying to use it to either pop engines on a capital ship or pop turrets on any type of other ship, is that the Inferno's weapon systems are fixed, which means that even if you use precision targeting mode, you can't get guns on target as accurately as you want because it has no gimbal capability, whereas the Stinger doesn't have that problem. The Stinger, you can just line up the turrets or the engines or whatever it is you're trying to knock out, and it's very, very easy for it to do it because its weapon systems are gimbaled, minus its size 5 cannon. Now, besides the drawbacks I've already laid out here, the ship is also very pricey. I mean, for cheaper, you could get a Lightning or a Super Hornet, so you have to kind of make that decision. This ship is for the player that does not want to dogfight, but still wants to be part of the action. In PvE, this ship excels pretty well, but I can easily see less seasoned players getting overwhelmed by too many AI in this ship, since its weapons and size can make players feel overconfident in its abilities. As part of a team, the ship is perfect for PvE, but if you're in a PvP team scenario, stay far away from other players and fighters and instead find targets of opportunity, such as players in heavy fighters or multi-crew ships. If you're part of a guild, you can always put your less seasoned pilots in these craft and have them focus on larger threats, while your more experienced pilots cover them. Understanding where the Stinger sits in the food chain before you buy it will help you better decide if this will be a better ship for you and your fleet, and set expectations appropriately before grabbing the sticks and taking off. Alright folks, that's it for me today, talking about the Stinger, a spurious, faithful replica of the feared Vandal heavy fighter. Let me know if you picked one up and what your thoughts are so far. Now let me know if you're also thinking of picking one up yourself. Be sure to ask your questions in the comments below, as myself and others can help answer your burning questions regarding the Stinger. And to wrap things up, I'll do my usual paints showcase so you can get an idea of the paints currently on offer during this ship's release sale. Until next time, fly safe, keep those thrusters hot, and I'll see you all in the black.